Hey, my name is Nathaniel Comeaux. I'm a lighting designer and production lover. Welcome to my world.
Hey everyone, I am Canute Neil Ellis, and this is a special edition of In My World. I have my good friend, colleague, an awesome guy, Nathaniel Comeaux, and he is of the lighting world. He is of the programming world and everything else. We're gonna find out all the things that he's involved in. Help me welcome Nathaniel. Nathaniel, how are you?
I'm doing good, and it's so good to talk to you again. I love talking again to people who were involved in my early career because it's just a blast.
Yeah. Most definitely. So I mean, we could go many ways with this. Like we prepped and said we could go super technical, which I want us to kind of dive in, and we could
Mhm.
kind of just go chill. And we could just simply start. Who are you?
Oh man, that's a great question. Well, I'm Nathaniel. I am mostly a lighting programmer. That's my love. I know enough audio to set up a microphone to talk into, and know my way around other things. But lighting is my world. I got into it 7 or 8 years ago now. I moved down here to go to Full Sail, and I originally thought I was going to do audio, but lighting sort of took my heart, and it was a challenge to learn, but I got the opportunity to work with so many amazing, smart people that taught me how to work. They taught me how to think and solve problems and
Mm-hmm.
be effective in a lot of different ways. And so I have a lot of people to thank for being successful. But
Yeah.
that's my background. Is I love lighting. I love making things flash. Love making them pretty. Just anything theatrical to music. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I absolutely love your attention to detail. Your attention to detail to get that one light on the other side, just a smidge to kind of mirror, even if you're
Hmm.
off axis. I remember at
Hmm.
times at Calvary. Actually, Facebook reminded me today, the day we're shooting today,
Hmm.
of OPCS, Orange County Public School,
Yes.
where we did their orchestra, and
Yeah.
I believe you did that.
Hmm.
And the picture doesn't do it any justice. We will have to probably find some videos and put that up. We did
Yeah.
250 voices, 60 orff instruments, a combination of like 400 people on stage, and you lit that so well that nobody, even the kid way in the back, he
Yeah.
had his little moment of shine where all that stuff. And so your
Yeah.
attention to detail is what I love. What
Hmm.
caused you to be that guy?
Uh, Really, it was the way I was taught, and this is why I'm so thankful to have the people who trained me. My first and longest teacher was Brent Allen at Northland
Mm-hmm.
Church, and the Northland Church team was amazing. They all had such long backgrounds of working in churches at Disney all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So that training was where I started to learn how to look at details in a different way, and it was frustrating at times because the starting point for learning lighting with my boss was not lighting. It was learning how to keep a calendar, how to meet your appointments. And so
Wow.
he had me doing super basic stuff at the beginning, and it drove me nuts. The number of times I just had to unplug and plug something back in or do
Mm-hmm.
what felt like rote tasks. But it was amazing
Mm-hmm.
how doing small things over and over again got me to pay attention to them. And that was one of the things
Wow.
I watched him do. Was, we trained 2 years without ever touching the main rig in our main sanctuary at that church before I
Mm-hmm.
got to start programming on it. And
Mm-hmm.
in that time, I watched him look at things I never would have thought to. You're
Mm.
sitting there in a service or in a show environment, and everyone's eyes are this way, but his eyes
Mm-hmm.
were always everywhere else. He was making
Yeah.
sure that even if the light in the back corner was out, he was going to see that. If
Yeah.
one
You got a
house
bulb
light was
out.
out, yeah, yeah. Oh, it drove me nuts how many times he would walk up next to me and just look at the ceiling. and then look at me. And I was like, I missed something. I know I
Yeah.
did. But really, it was amazing, and it did amazing things, because that attention to detail is so easy to skip, especially when you're young and you just want to
Mhm.
program, you want to get
Mhm.
going. And really being able to channel that and step back
Mhm.
allowed me to see things in a different
Mhm.
way, and to be able to identify problem spots. And
Mhm.
it did amazing things. So I can't stress enough, like, yeah, that attention to detail
Yeah.
is paramount, and it makes
Yeah.
you a better person. And I'll let you in on a secret. I
Mhm.
still make just as many mistakes. I just see them before other people because I've gotten good at looking
Oh,
for them. So if I can make the mistake and fix it before anyone notices, we're
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
that helps a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. You not only have the attention to detail to get like precision and make sure lights are focused and all that stuff, but the color scheme, the color blending. Where did that
Mhm.
come from? Did that come from as a kid where you kind of like you like your Crayolas and you kind of work on thing or as graphic designs before? How did that,
Mhm.
knack for, quickly blending colors and matching,
Mhm.
textures and all that stuff come about?
Well, on a broad level, like as far as creativity went, I was always a super visual person. Growing up,
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of video work. I started off in middle school, taking home videos and editing them
Mm-hmm.
in Adobe Premiere Elements, just doing stuff
Ooh.
like that. I know it was fancy. And for a while, I thought I was going to go into film because I was such a heavily visual person.
Mhm.
And I loved looking at things in that way. So I always sort of had this knack for visual creativity and for
Mhm.
appreciating aesthetics. And,
Mhm.
but inside of me, I always loved the live production environment too,
Mhm.
something about being in it and, doing stuff in the moment was so exciting to me. So when I started to train in production and lighting came up as an option, it was a
Mhm.
natural fit for me because it had this
Mhm.
heavily visual element, but it
Mhm.
also had this live in the moment piece to it.
Yeah.
And also I'm a musician, so I
Mhm.
love anything that ties into music. And
Yeah.
so obviously lighting gives you a huge, huge
Yeah.
pot of tools to work with. So I sort of had that base, but then it
Mhm.
did have to be honed a good bit. I
Mhm.
spent a lot of time. Brent did this with me and many other interns that he had over the years. And
Mhm.
even when I was an employee, we still worked on it, on really basic color theory. We started
Mhm.
at the very basic and took like 10 primary colors, and
Mhm.
we ranked them on what's a high energy color, what's a low
Mhm.
energy color, and just really built up these great base tools of, no matter what, you can always fall back on dark
Yeah.
blue, not going to be a super hype color in any situation, or
It's the it's the
yeah,
this.
or like yellow, you're going to kick them through the ceiling. Like
Uh-huh.
there's basic functions to colors and the way your brain interprets them. So we
Mhm.
built that foundation, and then from there we're able to expand out into adding texture. And
Mhm.
sometimes white can be a low energy color, sometimes you
Mhm.
can start combining things in new ways.
Mhm.
So I got there though because of hammering the basics of color
Mhm.
theory and just
Mhm.
doing simple 5 cue song programming
Yeah.
sessions where he said you get 1 cue per verse, 1 cue per chorus, and
Yeah.
just use your color theory. And
Mhm.
it drove me nuts,
Wow.
but it pushes me to
Mhm.
create in a different way. And then, when you have a massive rig of 80 fixtures and as many
Yeah.
gobos and colors as you could possibly want, you now know what you're looking at and how to look at it. And
Mhm.
so it was great. And I will always give so
Yeah.
much credit to having someone who will critique your work.
Yeah.
No matter how good you get, I always love having one more person's eyes on it because they'll see it
Mhm.
differently than you will, no
Mhm.
matter how similar or different.
Mhm.
We got to a point late in working together, Brent and I, where we both knew we had different programming styles, so we would
Mhm.
attack things differently. But
Mhm.
having someone else's eyes to go, here's how I would have done this, or why did you
Yeah.
do it this way, really makes you think about that. So the basics are
Mhm.
huge, and having someone to critique your work, even if you think it's the worst critique ever, it's a
Mhm.
different set of
It's
eyes, and
gonna
that,
help you.
yeah,
It's gonna help you.
it'll always teach you something.
Now, did you go home and study hex codes and making sure that you were kind of like this precision, or it kind of just came natural?
That came a little more natural.
Hmm.
Since I was visual, I started off only knowing what I wanted to see and not
Yeah,
knowing how to achieve it as much.
yeah.
And so with training, that's where I started to recognize, when I first started, I didn't understand how anyone would have a favorite gel color or remember exactly what RGB values were their
Yeah.
favorite. But just through doing it and through repetition, I kind of got to know how to get to what I wanted more quickly.
Yeah.
And that helped me speed up a little bit.
Yeah.
But I
No,
think repetition, yeah.
Yeah, get to quickly and speed up. I want to talk about that because you're super
Hmm.
fast. And before I even get to that, though, Nathaniel,
Hmm.
I want our viewers to know you're also a beast in terms of set design and
Oh,
creativity. Like,
thank you.
because
Yeah,
Northland, which was just around the corner from where I was, which is Cavalier Assembly, and we're talking about in Florida. And guys,
yeah.
he's still in sunny Florida, living it
Hmm.
up, nice weather there.
Yeah.
But you guys were killing it when it comes on to set design and how the set design integrated with the lighting fixture. Talk
Hmm.
about how that love and passion came about for set design and integrating it not only with the theme of the concert or the sermon or whatever, but
Hmm.
how that was a part of your often routine.
Yeah. Well, I gotta admit, I didn't start off loving it because set design, it can be really tricky to get
Yeah,
everything to work together when there's so
yeah.
many elements, and that attention to detail very much comes into play. But I did grow to love it because Northland, if there's one thing that I could say about my entire time there, was we always went big and everything was to scale. It was
Yeah.
it was 120-foot stage with an 80-foot wide RP wall. When you've got that much space to cover, there's
Yep.
not a lot of room for error, and you will notice shortcuts so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So it took some work, but I started to love it once I saw something come together well. Once I started
Mm-hmm.
to see a few sets and notice, hey, this isn't just busy work for the sake of work. We're not
Yeah.
rehashing this 1 foot area on the stage for no reason. It's because it
Mm-hmm.
pays off in the end. So
Mm-hmm.
that really brought me to love it. And the design process I learned from that whole team. This was led by our tech director Steve Groves, and then Brent
Mm-hmm.
carried it on in the lighting program. Was understanding the why behind the what. You're never
Mm-hmm.
doing something just for the sake of doing it. You
Yeah.
always have a reason, even if it's a really simple reason, like this color and this color go nicely together, and I based
Mm-hmm.
everything off of that. You need to have a
Mm-hmm.
reason to fall back on. It's a
Yeah.
great decision-making principle, from
Mm-hmm.
lighting all the way through even massive business principles. That's a great
Mm-hmm.
thing. So we would always sit down and start with either what are we hoping to accomplish or what is the goal? And
Mm-hmm.
then we would inform our decisions. We're picking this fabric because it conveys this message,
Yeah.
or we're going to do this
Nice.
size stage design even because this is a big moment that we need to create. And so
Mm-hmm.
everything was informed by understanding why we were doing it. And I
Mm-hmm.
know it drove people nuts sometimes, but there were plenty of
Mm-hmm.
times where we wouldn't do something because there wasn't a good enough reason to. And
Yeah.
that's something I see a lot of people falling into the trap of, we're doing it just to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
that works sometimes, but it's a much better approach to understand why you're going to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do, it's going to land so much better because you know exactly what you're conveying. So with our stage designs, oftentimes it fell around a huge series or service. So
Mm-hmm.
we would look at what is the message. Our last Christmas Eve service that we did before I left staff was one of
Yeah.
my favorite sets because we started months in advance, and it was probably the
Mm-hmm.
most intentional process I was a part of to
Mm-hmm.
say, what is the message we are going to convey? We started with a
Mm-hmm.
simple line, and then we
Mm-hmm.
said, how are we telling this story? We picked
Yeah.
out the points. And so everything was informed by that base decision of what we're conveying. And then anyone who was involved visually, from video to lighting, sat down and said, how are we going to
Mm-hmm.
convey this? When is lighting really going to take it and convey the message? When is video going to really
Mm-hmm.
take it and it's their piece? And
Mm-hmm.
so by building in that way, we always knew why we were doing something.
Yeah.
And it let us make decisions that were well informed and that really served ultimately what we were trying to convey. And it landed so well.
Nice.
It had a great arc of big moments, small moments,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
it was really powerful. So
And
I
you always
loved it.
immerse yourself in the presentation. And you're not one of them
Mhm.
boring lighting guys, which I'm not so big of that term, but lighting designer and programmer to just go there and hit go cues. Now,
Yeah.
speaking of go cues
Oh boy.
and macros. Talk to us
Yeah.
about macros, your love, your passion, why you do macros and why it's important.
Well, macros for my lighting style are something, first of all, I should say in install situations, macros are a lifesaver. Macros are
Mm-hmm.
how I build anything. I had the opportunity to, over the course of my time at Northland, redesign sort of the console setup in all three rooms in
Mm-hmm.
various levels. And so doing that, especially in an install, macros are great because it's a way to say, I know I'm going to need to do these 5 things. I don't want to
Yeah.
do all 5 of them. I can just do one button, does it all. You know,
Yeah.
everything from turning on my rig, checking the lamps, making sure everything's good,
Mm-hmm.
all the way to minute things of I need a macro at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day. Like it's a great tool, but anytime we did a macro that had multiple steps, it was always important that anyone that used it understood what was happening. I was
Yeah.
never a fan of implementing something that people didn't understand what was going on, because I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if you know this about technology. It breaks sometimes. And there are times where you have to do things manually. So we always approach macros from, here's what is happening underneath the hood. Now
Uh-huh.
here's an easier way to do it. And
Yeah.
it saved us so much time. And really, one of the guys who taught me the power of macros was George Jackson, amazing
Mm-hmm.
lighting designer,
Mm-hmm.
worked with you at Calvary. He's done
Yeah.
stuff all over the world.
Yeah.
But he was an amazing, the way
The
he thought
macro
about
king.
macros. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I learned all sorts of tricks. I learned a trick from him where we could password protect a macro, and if they didn't enter the right keyword, it wouldn't trigger, which was huge when you're dealing with rooms where people come in and out and they see a lit up button and they just want to hit it. That was a great catch-all. He did amazing stuff at the Amway Arena in downtown Orlando with macros that would set different light positions for different events and trigger all sorts of stuff. So macros are an amazing, amazing tool, especially when you understand what's going on under the hood. That's the one thing. If there's ever a macro you don't understand, I'm a big fan of open it up, read it, write it down, see if you can figure out what it does later. You know, if you're working on someone else's rig, that's a great way to learn some tricks. But macros are a huge, huge lifesaver, huge time saver. And
how deep do you go?
It really depends on what needs to be done. I'm not sure I've ever gone, well, that's not true. I've gone pretty deep in my own free time to see how crazy I can get. But a lot of what I use them for are in an install situation where, you know, you're turning on channels that are relays for your moving lights, your parking channels, you're bringing up maybe a preheat to check lamps. A lot of stuff that needs to happen in time increments was a big deal, because instead of, you know, lamping off your rig, waiting for it to cool and then having to manually turn it off in an hour, you hit one button, it lamps it off, the fans run till the fixture is nice and cool, and it automatically turns off. So a lot of time-based things was, it's really nice for. And one of the coolest examples recently, I didn't program this, but it was a George creation, and I loved it. But he does every year the ice show. There's a big ice show that happens at Gaylord Palms, and there's a Cirque show that happens within the big atrium. And so he has to figure out how to do a lot of handoffs between different shows in tight turnarounds and on a very tight schedule. So he uses macros to, on a specific time, switch to a page that runs an entire show, and switch time code pools for things that need to be triggered, bring up the right windows, basically everything you need. And it's great. Macros and agendas work together like this. I should say, when I talk about macros, what's in my brain is an MA macro. That's my favorite. That's where I have the most experience, because as I describe things, agendas and macros and the way they play together, I'm a sucker for MA2. I was lucky enough to train on the
That's where you started
Lamborghini
off.
of lighting consoles.
Yeah.
So
all the hot guys
great.
and the MTC and ETC guys are gonna be like, yeah, whatever, man.
Yeah, I know. It's a big debate. I started on the Grand MA, the MA1 series. That was the first thing I trained, which is funny because I've had to do shows on them and people don't know how to program them. So it always pays. And then we
big
got
old floppy disk.
Oh
and all that stuff. Now you guys, yeah, like you said, you mentioned George Jackson. He's a
Hmm.
guru on macros and just about everything, whether it's
Yeah.
from programming, install, you name it. What's your favorite part? Is it the setup? Is it executing? Is it the troubleshooting, figuring stuff out? Is it like the show come off to the utmost best? What's your favorite part?
Oh man, that's hard because there's fun parts and there's addicting parts, and they're not always the same. That's what's weird in production, because definitely one of the most addicting parts of live production and what sort of got me into it in the first place is that
Hmm.
feeling 5 minutes before doors open where
Yeah,
I've run out of time to do anything else. This is
yeah.
happening.
Hmm.
Because in a lot of creatives' mind, there's always something else to fix. There's
Always
always something to
something.
do.
Yeah.
So that's really addicting. But I think for me, what was enticing was communicating a message and seeing if I could bring everyone else on it. At
Hmm.
its core, I think a lot of techs and a lot of creative people are doing what they
Hmm.
do selfishly because there's a feeling you get when you
Hmm.
nail a moment that it's hard to describe, and it's amazing when you see it, but it's a whole
Hmm.
other level of amazing when you create it. And
Yeah.
so that's a really addicting thing. And then to be able to go, I want to see if I can get other people to feel this or to
Hmm.
see things this way. And
Hmm.
so that was always fun. I always loved being mid show when I knew a moment was coming up that
Hmm.
was really going to hit home, and no one in the audience knew it was coming, but
Yeah.
it's coming. And oh boy, that was so exciting.
Yeah.
Sneak out a camera for one of the goes so you could
Yeah.
catch the fly up or the big hit. Yeah, whatever it is. So that's a really addicting moment. And
Yeah.
at the end, to hear people talk about it, one of the benefits of being a tech is not everyone knows who you are or what you did, but to be
Hmm.
able to covertly hear people after the fact going,
Yeah.
that was amazing. Like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, did you see that? And
Yeah.
they don't know that you had a
Yeah.
hand in it, but
Yeah.
it's kind of fun. You're kind of like a little tech spy
Yeah.
hearing
How
how
you feel
people took
about
it.
that though? How you feel about being an unsung hero? How you feel about
Hmm.
that?
Well, I think for me, it was always important that what I did was for myself first. And so
Hmm.
me being happy with how something turned out was what I wanted to be enough. It wasn't always, but
Hmm.
along with that, I was always fortunate enough to have the people that really mattered, the people that saw all the
Hmm.
work go into it beforehand, speak
Hmm.
into and see the final result. And they were
That's
the
good.
ones that were always encouraging me when we got there or,
Hmm.
helping me make it better in the future. So for
Hmm.
me, that was enough. If my boss came up afterwards and said, "Hey, you nailed that. I'm so proud of how you handled that." And I
Hmm.
was fortunate enough to have so many great people train me. And Brent was always so amazing at, really hammering you, and he would
Hmm.
ride you hard up until the moment when it had to be delivered. But then from that point
Yeah.
on, he would recognize what you did do, and, you would move forward from that. And so to have people that understood what went into it,
Yeah.
recognize what I did, that was always a huge deal. And, as a tech, I eventually learned that those people are able to compliment you so much more because they know what you
Yeah.
did.
So
They know
it's
how
worth
many
it.
days you were there. Yeah,
Yeah.
till
Yeah. Yeah.
2
Yeah.
a.m. doing
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. 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 That's awesome.
Mhm.
That's awesome. Do's and don'ts for a lighting designer, programmer, a tech, a lighting guy.
Mhm.
Do's and don'ts.
All right, I'll drop these into a couple categories. First of all, let me work my way up. Let's start as an operator. You're
Hmm.
coming in, all you're doing is running someone else's console. They have a show already. Uh, I wouldn't recommend, if you were a temporary person, completely relaying out the entire console for your
Really?
2 hours.
I want to do that.
I know, I do too.
Some
And
guys just feel like they want to do that. Like, come on, guy, you're only here for 2 seconds. You
yeah, and
can't
then
reshuffle everything for your thing, unless you're like a lefty or,
yeah,
a lefty program or something.
I
But yeah,
I understand
yeah,
it to a point, but
yeah.
please don't do that and then leave it. And then the next person comes up and they hit the button that's normally like I don't know, front lights on, and they turn off the whole rig because you moved things around. That's the kind of stuff that it drives me nuts. And I did a lot to my boss. I would move windows all the time.
Yeah.
And at first it was because I was ignorant. And then as I got to know him better, I would occasionally do it just to see if you'd notice, which isn't, you got to know your boss well to do that. But that's a big one. But on the do side, for an operator is do as much prep ahead of time as you possibly can, even if you're not going to use any of it. You don't know the number of shows that I would walk up to with a binder, a full script. I'd have stuff color coded, and I wouldn't end up using any of it because some of it changed. But having that level of preparation ahead of time
gave you the confidence.
Yeah, it gave you the confidence and the freedom to go, hey, I've got this locked down. Now, if something changes, I'm not worried about this original set of things.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal. So those are some good tips, I'd say, for an operator. As far as a lighting programmer, oh boy, there's a lot, because my bread and butter was the programming side of things. And so I don't know, maybe I need to just write like a 200-page do's and don'ts document of everything I've learned. But I would say some of the best practices, so these would be do's that I always did when I was programming. One was listen to everything ahead of time, whether you're going to be fully programming it out or you're going to be punting it. Any type of preparation you can do ahead of time is a huge deal. And I'll hammer prep no matter what level you are. But that kind of preparation was good. Don't use yellow in every single cue. If you're a young programmer, you're going to be really tempted. Yeah. I'm going to say something controversial, but all white is not a good programming theory for everything, believe it or not. If you're doing all of one thing in general, it's a bad idea. So I would encourage people, before you do 10 all white cues, or you're going to be strobing for 2.5 minutes, you ask yourself, what is this doing? Is it necessary? My creativity got pushed, not just when I had to do more, but when I had to do less. That drove me nuts. Brent made me program a song once with one light. He gave me one light. He pointed at a wall and said, program a whole song with one light.
Yeah, let's see what you can do.
Yeah, and it drove me nuts, but it was great. So, really think about what you're doing. Save your big moments. Man, I cannot tell you. There's a similar thing in audio, and I watched Steve do this weekend after weekend when he was mixing. It would drive some people nuts. They thought he didn't mix loud enough or aggressively enough. But he would do this thing where at the right moment, he would flick the low pass filter off of the bass and bump it up just before a big note. And the whole room would like explode. And because you had restraint up till that moment, that big moment landed. So a lot of times programmers have trouble hitting a big moment because they got too big too early. But that restraint of how can I creatively do something on a small scale up until this moment? How can I save it? That's a huge win for a lighting programmer, especially. And I would say never, and this is I'm saying this because this is a tricky one for me, never turn down someone else's advice. I'm not saying take everyone's advice, but hear out everyone. I've had people come up to the booth after a service and give me the worst advice. Like, it's never going to work, or you're even talking to the wrong guy. But what you can do is you just learned how someone else interpreted and took in what you did or saw what you did. Oh, wow.
That's good.
And so no matter what, there is something to be gained from that. And you can now have one more marker in your mind of here's how someone can see this. And it almost becomes a tool for when you want to do that intentionally, you now have a way to do it. So I would encourage people, never, always hear it out, always see what they have to say, even if it's bad advice. And I've gotten plenty of it. And there's even going to be times where you think it's bad advice, and down the road you realize, hey, I can use that. So that's a big thing. So that covers, let's see here, we got operators, we got programmers, designers. One of the best things you can do is have as many conversations as possible. There's always a moment for a designer when you're like, I've got a picture of this, let's just go for it. But the more questions you can have answered on the front end, the less you're going to have to go back and redo something on the back end. Never be afraid to ask clarifying questions. You'll feel stupid sometimes. You'll be like, I don't know why I need to ask this. But that's always a great tool, is communication. And remember, it's not, if you have to do a creative decision in a different way to meet a client's request,
Mhm.
it is not an insult. It's not a
Mhm.
personal attack on how you did it.
Yeah.
A lot of us designers can get really protective. Like, well, that's my design. I designed it this
Yeah.
way because
Yeah.
it's this exact
Spent
reason.
all hours on
Yeah.
this last night.
Yeah. This is my life. And if you hate this, you hate me. Like,
Yeah.
but you can't have that mentality. See everything as a challenge of
Yeah.
how can I do it differently? You know, the
Uh-huh.
number of times I've delivered something that wasn't how I originally pictured it, but I was really
Mhm.
proud of how it turned out. I can't
Mhm.
even tell you how often that happens, but
Yeah.
it's really a great thing to be able to do.
What do
So
you need to know in any of those three positions? There's a gig that's coming up. What's the need to know on your list to go to the production meeting? You know, is there a list of things? Is there this one thing that no matter, obviously when doors, you know, in our
yeah,
doors and thing, but
yeah.
in terms of a technical thing, is there a
Hmm.
specific thing like, hey, make sure you ask this question or these
Yeah.
series of questions?
Well, I always, anytime I come on a new production, whether we're, you know, doing theater, music, whatever I do, I always start as broad as I can with,
Mhm.
you know, what is this event? Who's it for? Your audience will inform a lot
Mm.
of your decisions. So
Mm.
understand who is it for? What are you trying to do? You know,
Yeah.
if you have a talking head where this person's presence is the big deal, this isn't your moment to create an 80Q light show behind them while they're talking. Understand what the purpose and the function is of your role. Are you
Yeah.
lighting for video? Are you not? Is a big one. Or,
Mhm.
you know, where is the focus for that? And then
Mhm.
start to get more granular. I always like to know ahead of time, what's my console? What does my rig look like?
Mhm.
And these are all things that let me prepare mentally so I know what I'm walking into.
Mhm.
Even if, and there's been times where I can't walk in with a prepared show file, or, you
Mhm.
know, it's hard to do work ahead of time. When you can do it, I always recommend it. I set up my
Mhm.
show files all the time, you know, in advance, and it frees up time for solving problems because there's
Mhm.
always problems. A
Yeah.
spoiler alert, you got into tech, there's always problems.
Always gonna
But
be something.
yeah,
A
so
light doesn't lamp on or
mhm.
don't want to lamp on,
Oh
or
yeah.
hazer doesn't work,
Yep.
or you know
All the time.
somebody didn't stand where you put the X, like stand here, and now
Yeah.
you gotta go move a light.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So as much as I can prepare mentally ahead of time, and then
Mhm.
once I'm in the situation, just constantly getting feedback, you know, find
Mhm.
out who's my point of contact, who can sign off on if this is good or not,
Mhm.
and make sure that they're happy. That's been a big thing in corporate work,
Yeah.
especially, is find the client who has the
Mhm.
yes, no power and
Mhm.
make sure that they sign off on everything you're doing, you
Mhm.
know, make sure that they're
Mhm.
happy with it, because if they're happy with it, it comes back so much faster. And, you know, people recognize the difference between someone who's there to design for themselves and someone who's there to
Mhm.
design for the client. And
Mhm.
so it's so important to make sure that you identify who is important and that you're communicating with them.
Yeah. Do you pack a toolkit on the road? Is there any such
Mhm.
thing for you?
Well, no matter where I go, I always have, I call it my nerd pouch. My boss gave me
I
one.
love that.
It was a christening when I started work, and
Yeah.
I could clip it to my belt, and it had a C wrench, it had
Uh-huh.
Sharpies, it had a mega wrench for lighting, and I think I had a pen. The pen wasn't
Uh-huh.
really vital, but it had those core tools, whatever that is for what you do. And,
Uh-huh.
you know, my boss always had his, our tech
Uh-huh.
director always had his. And that was a great habit of understanding, even when you're not expecting to solve something or have to fix
Yeah.
something, always be ready for it. So I
Wow.
always had a C wrench. I always had a Sharpie. You know, I
Mhm.
tried to be prepared in those ways.
Wow.
As far as a favorite rig or tool, I've liked them all. You know, there's stuff that I prefer. I prefer MA, but some of my favorite shows I've done have been the ones that pushed me. I did a Christmas show this last year, and it was on an ETC Ion, which is my least
Mhm.
favorite console. It was a very stripped down set of fixtures because there were
Mhm.
a ton of power restrictions. The room wasn't
Mhm.
set up for what we were doing. The rig was
Mhm.
small, but what I loved about it is, since it was everything that I didn't like, it was everything I avoided using. And
Yeah.
so it pushed me creatively. And
Mhm.
that was a fun challenge. So, um, you know, have your basic tools of your
Yeah.
craft. You know, if you're going into somewhere you're going to have to be an electrician, always take a DMM, have that
Mm-hmm.
multimeter, you know,
Yeah.
understand the basics. If you
Mm-hmm.
understand the basics of what everyone's doing, you become so
Mm-hmm.
much more useful.
Yeah.
Now, it drives me nuts when I work with someone that's like, well, I'm only the lighting guy, so I can only touch lighting cables, and I'm not willing to run a power cable, and I don't
Yeah.
understand what you're talking about if you are outside of my niche.
Mm-hmm.
So know the basics of
Yeah.
what you need to understand. Basic power theory. My
Mm-hmm.
dogs are losing their mind. But understand basic power, understand data flow, understand a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of a lot of things so that you can be useful
Mm-hmm.
and be knowledgeable. And that has served me so well to be able to solve problems and not have this dark spot where I know nothing about it. So if something
Mm-hmm.
goes wrong over there, I'm hosed.
Yeah.
That always served me well, was expanding.
How important is a plot, whether it's just an in and out, is a plot, and not just a stage plot for where the lights go, but a full channel list plot. Is
Mhm.
that something that you practice or you recommend people practice?
Yeah, absolutely. As much as you can have in paperwork, this was something Brent taught me. It's the hit by the bus mentality. You need to
Mm-hmm.
understand that if you are walking to your job and you get hit
Mm-hmm.
by a bus, which is an extreme example, or something hinders you, you need to always have in your mind, there's a
Mm-hmm.
chance that someone else will have to hop on and do what
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing. You know, always
Mm-hmm.
make yourself replaceable. So stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
is super important. Having a plot that's clearly labeled. If you're in an
Mm-hmm.
install, maintaining your paperwork. If you redesign your rig and change your layout, make sure you're
Mm-hmm.
reflecting your paperwork, because all you're doing is saving yourself time in the future. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
that saves time for other people, but
Yeah.
most of the great practices will save you time. The
Not
number of
on
times,
scribbles of paper. You
yeah,
like.
yeah. I the number of times I've taken a shortcut and then gone back a week later and been mad
Uh-huh.
at myself for making that shortcut because now I have to do more work.
Yeah.
It's always good to keep it clean. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it makes sure that you're not just thinking about yourself, you're thinking about the person that's coming after you potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And even if, it's a very simple, no one else is going to be handling the rig but you, it's
Mm-hmm.
always a great reference, having something that's quick and easy to look at that is reliable. It's
Yeah.
really good practice. And when you get into bigger shows or things that are more complicated, having that practice and that habit serves you so well, because there's no way you can be popping into your console's patch sheet to look for the fixture you need every time something
Mm-hmm.
breaks
Yeah.
or you need to find something.
Yeah. How important is lighting?
And this is a big thing. You have to understand what is and what isn't mission critical. My
Mm-hmm.
front light, even though it's not fun and exciting, is something that's
Mm-hmm.
mission critical. Being able to see
Mm-hmm.
someone that's talking is
Yeah.
mission critical. Creative lighting isn't so mission critical, but understanding the power of it is important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Understanding how people, when they're walking into a space, they're going to
Mm-hmm.
see it before they experience it. They're not going
Yeah.
to walk into a perfect moment where the sound and the light and the video is all together. People are
Yeah.
always taking things in visually first.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding the power that lighting has to set a mood, to convey a message,
Mm-hmm.
is obviously something I'm really passionate about. It's something I love, and
Mm-hmm.
creating moments. It's so hard to do it when you aren't capturing that visual element. We're visual people.
Mm-hmm.
One of the great things I love about color theory, and I can get so nerdy about it, is how
Mm-hmm.
colors make you feel. There's so
Yeah.
many great studies about the simple color theory of how blue light versus red light will make you feel, or what
Mm-hmm.
message are you conveying with green or orange or purple. All these things play in. And so understanding how that works in is the same to me as having a graphic on a screen that is
Mm-hmm.
conveying words. Obviously, someone's going to design that. Or even how you dress. Someone standing on
Mm-hmm.
stage is going to dress a certain way because it conveys a message.
Yeah.
So understanding that everything visual conveys a message is vital. And then you have all these opportunities with lighting to convey messages. And at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, that's what it comes down to for me, is
Mm-hmm.
you are a tool not only to be part of that, but to enhance it, to really help
Mm-hmm.
people grasp what you're going for or experience what you're going for.
Did you take time on your own to go seek more tech stuff? What are some of the resources that you use for yourself, your personal gain to be where
Mhm.
you are now?
Yeah, one of my favorite tools, and part of the reason I'm so partial to MA2 is that
Hmm.
they offer their software for free and they offer a visualizer for free. The
Oh.
MA3D software is one of the
Hmm.
best resources for a lighting designer to use. So as I
Hmm.
learned, when there's not always time to get in a room on a rig, it's not always
Hmm.
practical, but that was something that I got set up on early. And I did so
Hmm.
many programming labs where I would have a song and I would program it in a virtual representation of the room,
Yeah.
and that gave me so much more practice than I could ever get because I wasn't required to have a console in front of me or a room with
Hmm.
this amazing rig. I could have amazing rig in front of me and it was
Hmm.
completely virtual and I wasn't going to
Yeah.
break anything if I didn't follow
Yeah.
best practices, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So that was a huge tool for learning.
Hmm.
Just being able to repetitively do that. That's a great, especially if someone wants to be a designer. That repetition will teach you so much. One of my favorite practices was I would start with this one thing I wanted to do. Say it was a lighting trick. And then I would work backwards and go, okay, if I want to do this, this would work in this kind of moment. Then I would pick a song and then
Hmm.
build around that and see if I could build a whole song worth of programming around a
Hmm.
certain effect or a certain moment. And
Hmm.
it sort of taught me what worked and what didn't. So that repetition
Yeah.
on that kind of software was a big deal because
That's
I know I've
good.
said it a bunch, but repetition is huge. Just doing something over and over again. You mentioned speed earlier. That's what got me
Hmm.
so fast. Man, I
Hmm.
could I could enter keyboard shortcuts for an MA on PC just as fast as I could type on a console. And
Yeah.
that was the kind of repetition that really made me more effective
Hmm.
on a lot tighter schedules.
If you weren't doing lighting and production, what would you be doing?
Oh, man. Well, if I go all the way back to high school, I originally wanted to do film. That was
Mm.
what my roommate came to Full Sail for film. I was intending
Hmm.
to join him and I never did. So
Hmm.
that would have probably been one of my goals,
Hmm.
was to do something in film, but I ended up
Hmm.
in production.
Hmm.
Now I did do programming and coding in high school, so I feel fortunate to
Yeah.
get to do some of that. I always, that programming mind,
Yeah.
I get to apply it in some different ways, which is super
Yeah.
challenging, but
Yeah.
it's a lot
Yeah.
of fun. But I will say my fallback has always been, if I ever decide to give up on everything technical, I'll probably repair fences in Montana. That sounds like a nice complete opposite departure from the tech world.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
that's
because I was
that's
about to say that's not even fair, Nathaniel, because you still kind of sneak into the side gate to be
yeah,
tech. Repairing fence in Montana. Tell us about
yeah.
where did that come from? That's where you grew up?
No, actually, I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So
Yeah.
I've always loved the outdoors, but between graduating high school and moving to Florida, I was fortunate to
Mm.
spend a little under a year in Montana. And I loved that area.
Yeah.
Now I'm not sure, now that I've been in Florida this long, if I could live in that much cold. I've gotten a little weak. I've gotten
Yeah.
soft. I like the sunshine a bit.
Yeah.
But that was just always something that if I ever truly didn't want to do
Hmm.
anything technical, which I'm not sure I'll
Hmm.
really get to that point. I love
Yeah.
technology and how
Yeah.
fast it moves and all
Yeah.
that, but that was something that was the complete other end of the spectrum. And it just sort of, the part of my brain that always wanted to go to a cabin with no electricity would kind of be
Uh-huh.
satisfied with that. But
Uh-huh.
we'll see. Whichever,
Yeah.
I have to fight against whatever I'm not doing. The other thing sometimes seems more appealing,
Yeah.
but it's always a lie. You got to enjoy what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah. I'm sure you'd figure out a way to put tech in the fences that you would build
Oh,
at some
absolutely.
point.
Program a light show, maybe
Yeah.
fiber optic fences or something.
Yeah. 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 So I'm gonna put you in a spot. It's
Okay.
career day. You're
Mhm.
you're 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 here to present. I'm the kid. You have a minute to convince me that I need to be in lighting. Go.
Oh boy. Well, here's why you should do lighting. And I'm pitching to you, Canute. I want to get you to convert. Here's why you
Okay.
should do lighting. If you have ever listened to a song and loved the way it made you feel, or you've been to a show
Hmm.
and you took in that experience and you were really excited about it, it conveyed an emotion, it got you
Hmm.
excited for something, or, you walked out of there feeling a certain way. Lighting allows you to do that, allows you to not just be a recipient of the experience of music or theater or whatever you're in. It lets you be part of conveying a message or a feeling or an emotion to someone else. So if you've ever enjoyed anything from listening to a great speaker talk all the way to an amazing concert, doing lighting is a way that you can be part of conveying their message and part of communicating to a greater audience so they can experience that same thing.
What's the best way to start as a lighting guy?
Well, thanks to the internet, there's a lot of great resources. I would say download an MA2 software, download an MA3D visualizer, hop on YouTube. There's tutorials that start at the very basic of how to use a lighting console and start learning those technical aspects. And, see if you can find a local theater where you can learn, get involved at a church. Even if it's the most basic setup, it is something for you to learn on. Nice. You can always start, even if you have 4 LEDs and a free console, that is something for you to practice on. And that's something for you to have experience with. So get started.
How can we find you, Nathaniel?
Well, if you want to reach out to me, I have a website, comeauxdesign.com. It has a great resource to access me for my lighting work. It also has a side website for my web design stuff. If you want to see the full gamut of what I'm doing, that's a great way. I do also have an Instagram for Comeaux Design. So you can see on there. Or, just start furiously Googling my name and you'll probably find me somewhere.
Cool. Thank you so much for being on In My World. Thank you so much for letting us in your world. Is there anything else you want to share?
No, I really appreciate you bringing me on. I really appreciate you considering me a trusted resource. Means a lot. And yeah, if anyone has any questions at all, lighting wise, production wise, I love answering questions. Don't be afraid to reach out and find me.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much again, Nathaniel. Hey, if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit a like button. And be sure to drop a comment. Let us know what you think. Reach out to Nathaniel. We'll put his links in the description here. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Canute, and I'll see you next time.